it just occurred to me that this kind of whole talk is probably one of the most important talks on esports that I've ever given. Let me kind of like set up what this talk is about. Let's watch a clip first. That'll kind of explain what this is about. Because today I'm not just going to talk about Nintendo Esports, although I will cover that. I'm also going to talk about the sort of structure of esports in general, why some of that is kind of messed up. So let's watch a clip first.
I really do wish if anyone from Nintendo corporate is watching this right now, if anyone's seeing the amount of excitement these sets can get, and everything that goes with it, just give Melee a chance. Even if it's just Ultimate, support the Ultimate scene, support the Smash scene in general. You have people day in and day out streaming, making content, competing, going to tournaments, and we do it all grassroots. We have this like Beyond the Summit because they raise money, and that's great. But Nintendo, I need to say, I love you guys, but you are the only one not putting in resources into the scene. Look at Capcom Cup. Look at that celebration. Look at every other game. Look at Fortnite. This is the step that you're missing. And if you did that, the culture and the appreciation that you guys would receive would be bar none unlike anything you've received. So hope you're listening. It's probably a shot in the dark, but please support Smash tournaments. All right, that's kind of,
Yeah.
So this is our boy Hungrybox. Hungrybox is one of the most successful, debatably the most successful Melee player of all time. He is an absolutely incredible player. And he's speaking to something that has been known to people in the FGC community, the fighting game community, for a long time, which is that Nintendo is kind of historically one of the worst. One of the least supportive of esports initiatives out of anybody. And this talk is important for two reasons. Not just to kind of call Nintendo to action in that way and sort of kind of explain why I think that is, but also to sort of structure out the ways that different companies are approaching esports and exemplify the ones that I think are most healthy. So we're gonna get into it. I think this is a very cool topic. And to be really clear, just like from the outset, a lot of people are upset at Nintendo not because they don't support the Smash community, but because they sometimes actively try to subvert it. So this clip kind of explains that pretty well.
Because the things I know are all just like kind of surface level. So it's a fact that Red Bull and ESL tried making big time events with Smash Melee, and Nintendo stopped it. Like Nintendo actually like just didn't let it happen. Okay, so it's not just when I say Nintendo's trash, it's not just because they don't support us. They actively stop other people from supporting us.
Nintendo has been historically so slow to get any kind of support. I mean, I remember back on Twitch when they were considering, or they maybe even might have DMCA'd certain streams that were playing Nintendo games on Twitch because they thought that it was not good to do. Nintendo is based out of Seattle, and I meet a lot of people that work for Nintendo here on the English side. It seems to me that they have a good understanding of the importance of esports, but once you get over to Japan, the corporate side of Nintendo seems to really not understand the importance of esports or why to drive people to their games in an esports way. They seem to feel like, and this is all anecdotal in my personal experience, but you can take this with some confidence because I'm obviously involved in the scene and I've been very involved in FGC for a long time and run teams in FGC. So when I talk to Nintendo corporate, the sense I get is they feel if they invest heavily into esports, they will alienate their casual audience. So they have this whole audience of people that are playing like Wii Sports or doing whatever the hell they do. I don't even know. And they feel like if they invest heavily into competitive, they're going to pull that casual audience away and they're going to have to balance games for it and do a bunch of work that they don't want to do for it. That's the sense that I get. Now, it's interesting to note that even like with Smash Ultimate, right, I would argue, and I think a lot of people would argue that Smash Ultimate is the most balanced Smash of all time. I think you can safely say that. With the amount of characters that are on the roster, the amount of competitively viable characters is very high. And Sakurai, although he doesn't explicitly say that he's balancing for competitive, definitely does balance the game. Nintendo has had some official tournaments, and here's a list of them, an article about it. So Nintendo has announced and has run some tournaments, but it's fairly inconsistent in the way they do it. And generally, they aren't really supporting these events. There's not much progress that we can make if we just talk about Nintendo's problem with hosting esports events. And I think a more productive direction to take this conversation would be to look into how different companies approach esports and the ones that I think are most beneficial. For that, we're going to have to bust out my ultimate weapon. There are a few different ways that companies support esports. The first way is no support. This is basically Nintendo, or we could say effectively no support. So for a company this large, there is no reason why Nintendo should not support esports. And it would objectively be better for their game. It would increase the health of their community. It would grow their player base. There's no reason not to have esports. So esports as an initiative is effective, I think, for any publisher, because esports is a pretty symbiotic relationship with games and gamers. If you run an esport, it seems to be a good gateway into getting people to play your game. And also, it gets a lot of press from Twitch and things like that. I think of things like Magic the Gathering Arena. Magic the Gathering has had a huge resurgence through esports. The MDGA tournament, the Worlds tournament, which was just a little while ago, was enormously successful and its largest of all time. So like esports is even going into traditional games and bringing it back. A competitive nature to a game, I think, is pretty objectively good. On the extreme side, we have no support. And then on the other extreme side, we have full franchise support. This would be your LCS and Activision type things. Now, there's a lot I can say about this, but I actually have almost as many problems with the franchise model as I do with the no support model. Particularly with Activision, which I think is making some of the biggest mistakes. What Activision is basically doing, and this deserves its own conversation, and we will have that conversation. I've been kind of prepping to have that conversation, and we might even have that conversation soon. But Activision is effectively creating a black hole in esports because they are asking for such high prices from teams, and they're artificially inflating the value of esports on the side of the teams and the players by so much. Unrealistic player salaries and even more unrealistic franchise fees to the tune of $20 to $50 million each team. And the only person that's benefiting from that is the publisher. What that's going to do is, because there's no return on investment that's possible for companies like brands that support this, whether endemic or non-endemic brands, are not going to pay that much money to invest back into the league and sponsor the league, because they're just not going to get that kind of return out of it. There's no way that a company like I don't know, pick a random company like a peripheral company like Logitech, right? They're not going to invest $50 million in the league and get that back in terms of sales of equipment, or in terms of even brand or exposure, even earned media, as defined by like being talked about enough to be worth it, is not going to be anywhere close, right? With OWL or CDL, I don't think anybody would make that case. That's sane, right? Anyone that's watching this would be able to intuitively think that out. You don't even have to know anything about the business. I can tell you from an agency side that it's true, and I can tell you that just on my authority, but you don't even need it, right? Like, you can just think, okay, is OWL going to sell $50 million worth of equipment? No, right? Probably never, right? And that's just one team, much less like how many are in the league. But it's less of a problem than better than no support. I always laugh because a bunch of guys at Riot, early on, they tried to tell me, I had a really high up person at Riot tell me once that they internally at Riot didn't see the LCS as a legitimate marketing tool for League of Legends. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me, right? Like, how can anybody possibly think that? Like, they literally unironically thought that League of Legends esports didn't drive users to play the game, which is just absurd, right? And like nowadays, the League of Legends LCS, the entirety of it is a marketing budget. It's flagged under marketing for Riot, or it was when I last looked. So now they just acknowledge it as a complete, basically, advertising budget. And it is. I mean, and it's very successful at that. A lot of people play League of Legends because why in God's name would you play that game at all? But if you do play it, you might have been inspired by the LCS or something. So it's very successful. And then the last thing that I want to bring up is these are the guys that I think are killing it and are doing it right. And I'm going to call this community-supported tournaments. And the people that I want to shout out with this is Epic Games. So Epic came out with a $100 million competitive prize pool for 2019. And a pretty large majority of this prize pool was given to people who could enter the tournament. So there was $1 million every week leading up to a final, which was a $30 million prize pool. The finalists, if you were a finalist in it, you were guaranteed $50,000, and the winner, which was Booga for 2019, won $3 million. This is very, very cool. Community-supported tournaments are, I think, the way that everything should go. So we could say publisher community-supported tournaments, because there isn't really a name for this. But the idea is that a publisher puts in X money of dollars. Anyone can compete, so they're not gated by esports teams. They just have to enter some layer, qualify. Now, disclaimer, there are a lot of problems with publisher community-supported tournaments, such as sometimes qualifications are not legitimate, sometimes people are teaming. Epic Games had a lot of these problems initially because they were the first people to do it. So, of course, when you're the first people to do it, you're always going to have problems trying to deal with some of the tomfoolery that happens in these sort of things. So, understandably, Epic Games is not perfect in this schedule, but it's a lot better than these models, and I'm going to explain why. And I'm also going to explain why I hope that if Nintendo does do this, that they do it from this angle. I really like the idea of publisher community-supported tournaments because, number one, this gives... I guess to summarize all of it, it's there's no gatekeeping. It gives any person who's actually good at the game the ability to compete, which is really what esports and athletics should be about. When I think about the Olympics, for example, I want to watch the athlete that is absolutely the best at their craft, the person that trained the most, spent the most time, did the most amount of dedicated practice, had the right coaches, established the right resources, and then went on to win. Their dedication, their mindset, right? What I don't like about the franchise model is that it encourages players who go long-term. And in the franchise model, it basically forces you to choose brands and influencers over players. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is if you want to make any kind of discernible return on investment in a franchise model, you need to have influencers that are pushing your stuff. If you look at any successful esports team in the franchise models, they're all doing it through influencers. Look at 100 Thieves, look at Team Liquid. These are people that have incredibly big followings, and you're using those big followings to push sponsors and push product because those are the main ways that sponsors ascertain if you're worth it. That correlation isn't necessarily there between a big influencer and a good player. Sometimes they're one and the same, right? You get like a Bjergsen, for example, and that is incredibly rare, but not always, and not usually even. So the problem with franchise models, I think, is they eliminate the sort of feast or famine type attitude that I think should be endemic to all competitive sports. It should be a natural part of all competitive sports it should be scary, it should be the best finish first, and it should be people that lose their skill or lose their interest eventually wash out. That's just the nature of competition, I think, and I think that's pretty healthy for esports in general. Why do I think that's healthy for esports in general? Because it pushes good narratives. It tells good stories. And esports does not ultimately have anything to do with the teams or the competitions or whatever. It's about the stories and the rivalries and the narration between the people that are competing, the teams that are competing. It's the stories therein, the mindset, the drive. Look at traditional sports. All traditional sports is stories, right? It's three people at a desk talking about this person's drama with this person's beef with this person's individual drive, this person's becoming story, this person coming up through college draft and then becoming one of the best NFL linebackers, right? It's that kind of stuff. The same thing is true of esports, and a lot of esports hasn't figured this out yet. I think this is like the biggest thing that publishers need to do to grow esports to an actual real level, like on par with traditional sports, is tell good stories. Activision is probably the most notorious at this, I think, of not doing this because CDL and OWL are basically completely uninteresting. Activision has no idea how to tell a story. The LCS has gotten better at it. And over time, they're being helped by a lot of teams that really understand this, like 100 Thieves and Team Liquid. So the LCS is getting a little bit better with it, but still just, you can only watch CLG versus TSM so many times. And if you don't understand the rivalry or why it matters or those players, that's not going to reflect in the success of that brand. So for esports to be healthy in general, and it just occurred to me that this kind of whole talk is probably one of the most important talks on esports that I've ever given. And I think it's really good, but just to jerk myself off right there for a bit. But esports to be healthy in general, it needs to have a combination of these great narratives and great players that people want to watch at a high level. So publisher-supported tournaments, I think, are the way to do that without gatekeeping behind a franchise. To me, the franchise model, especially for Activision, just feels like a cash grab. It feels very inauthentic to the nature of esports. It feels like Activision just wants a lot of money. And they want to get as much money as possible. And nothing to me indicates that Activision cares even the least bit about the actual competitive health and integrity of CDL and OWL. I have no reason to believe that that's the case, which is super unfortunate, right? I mean, they can pander to it. They can say that they do, but there just doesn't seem to be anything to it. Like everything that CDL and OWL puts out, they just don't really care about esports in general as like a healthy medium or something they intend to survive. And publishers get so much benefit from esports franchising, right? They get the entire franchise fee. The teams then have to pay all the expenses for them to be in the league. The publisher completely controls the media. They control the IP of the game. They control everything. They get all the sponsors. They dictate how much money they want to give to the teams, if anything. The publishers have such an already, they're so advantaged in the way that they control esports. And even Epic Games, that is just literally giving away money to anybody that wants it, still gets a ton of benefit and controls the whole IP. So what Epic Games did is they looked at the model for esports and they said, look, we don't need a franchise. We don't need to do that. We don't need to. They could have done it, right? They could have done this. They could have said for at the time when the World Cup got announced, Fortnite was the most popular game in the world. And they could have easily said, we're taking 10 teams, we're taking applications, it's $30 million or hell, $50 million, $75 million to enter. Because look, Activision is doing it for CDL and we're 50 times bigger than that. So we can do it. We could do it, right? Epic Games could have done that. Make no mistake, there is no reason why Epic Games couldn't do that. They just realized that it would have been healthier for their game and it would have been better for their game if they did the community run tournaments. And they were right. They were 100% right. The World Cup was a lot more successful at bringing people in and did really well in terms of viewership because it drove narratives and it drove players who are the best at their craft to do what they do best, which is compete. And I think that is what we need more of in esports. So I think if Nintendo is going to enter the game, they need to do it like this. And the cool thing about the fighting game community that I've always respected is that they're just so scrappy. They're like, you could literally just give them their, like the CDL, OWL, like Activision publisher is just like this big dude at a table and there's just pheasants and food and turkeys and everything. And he just, more. Bobby Kotick's just like, 50 million, 20 million, more. And then meanwhile, you've got like the FGC community. It's like, please, I'm so hungry. That's why I'm named Hungrybox. Please, sir, $10 for a tournament, $20. And Nintendo's like, nah. They're fine. Everybody likes our game anyway. They'll buy it no matter what, right? Like, if Nintendo just was like $1,000 tournament, people would be like FGC would be so grateful because they're so used to getting nothing, right? Like, they're so used to getting nothing. It would be amazing if Nintendo just supported the tournament even a little. And the way they could do it is just by putting out cash prizes. I mean, I think it's so smart. You don't need to franchise FGC. It would never work, right? FGC is just like the Wild West. And what you do is you just create a sign-up form, basically, and have some interns look it over for people that want to create tournaments of like $5,000 or more. And you put a pool of money out towards it. It's going to take some human resources, but that's it. And then you just say, yeah, and you can run tournaments. At the very least, don't try to stop your people, your own community from trying to run tournaments, which is like what we've seen from Blizzard with StarCraft in the past, and even Heroes of the Storm to some extent. And we don't even need to get into that. That's like Voldemort in esports. Like you literally say Heroes of the Storm, and like somewhere far beyond, like 50 people just disintegrate, like the Jedi felt when Heroes of the Storm died. Oh my God, it was like Alderaan. It was terrible. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say about it. Like I feel bad that the fighting game community, I don't know if you've ever been to any of these tournaments. If you do, I encourage you to go to like an Evo or to like a Genesis or Frostbite or anything. They're so wholesome. They're so cool. You can like the OWL and the CDL tournaments, there's like security and there's like big dudes and like there's like an elevated stage and the players just feel better than you. They're just like, they're up there and they're on their computers with their headsets and they're like 6 consoles and freaking bunch of wires and like black dragon, red dragon camera that's like over here, like to get the esports shot, you know, the nerd shot where you're like this and like the whole thing. And it just feels like so removed, right? The FGC community is literally like a bunch of plastic chairs. It's like right up next to the screen. And you're like literally like 5 feet away from the players. Nobody ever does anything bad for the most part, except for the guy that threw that crab the one time. I guess that was like the one time that a guy did something bad. And people are just like the players and the community is like right there with you. I do play fighting games. Yes, I actually play Isabel at a pretty high level on Smash. That is not a troll. And so I love fighting games. I also play Dragon Ball FighterZ, and I love the community. I'm big in it. This is why, I mean, like, when I was on CLG, I built a Smash team, and there was no ROI off it. It was literally a loss for the company. I built a Melee team and an Ultimate team because I loved, or a Smash 4 team at the time, because I just loved Smash so much. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this stuff. And actually, those guys are still on CLG to this day, which is a testament to CLG. Good stuff. So yes, I'm a big fan of SGC. It's so wholesome to have, like, and then the best thing is, like, the most amazing thing is, like, when someone pops off or there's like an incredible player or a comeback, just everybody jumps out of their chair, just jumps up and down. People freak out. People are just going crazy. It's awesome. It's a super wholesome community. If you're not familiar with FGC, I completely recommend you check it out. It's totally its own beast. So I would love more than anything to see this come to FGC, but I'm not optimistic, because I just think that, like, Nintendo corporate is so far, they're so old-fashioned, and it might take them, like, I think if anybody gets into esports, like, Nintendo will eventually, because the people that are at the top of Nintendo will literally just die eventually. And then what'll happen is the new age people who do play these games and understand the importance of esports will come in, but that might take like 20 or 30 years. And I hope we're more progressive than that. But if we do it, I think publisher community tournaments are probably the best thing. So those are my thoughts on Nintendo. I think that's my thoughts on publishers and how they can support things, the best way to support these tournaments. And I'm glad we talked about this, because there's 99 million ways to support esports. These publisher community supported tournaments are really cool. And I've long since championed Epic Games for some of their really intelligent marketing ideas around how to make esports less gatekeeper-y and more, like, accessible to the best competitors. I think Epic Games does this very well, and that people should follow that model. It's ultimately cheaper. Yes, the publisher doesn't, like, literally just gorge on money but, you know, it's not helping Activision's stock price right now, so I don't know. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this talk. I hope you enjoyed this. This is some good insight into Nintendo, some good insight into how esports franchising works, and some thoughts behind it. If you liked this talk, you can subscribe to the YouTube. It's youtube.com/Devin Nash. And you can watch my Twitch stream, which is every weekday, twitch.tv/Devin Nash. We have lots of special guests. And you can join our community at discord.gg/Devin, I think. Yeah, that's right. Okay. All the links are in the description down below. Thank you guys very much.